Hey y'all, what is up? Thank you so much for joining me here at the podcast. This is Valkymie's Alchemy. This is my channel, and today we are going to be discussing the 369 manifestation method that Nikola Tesla made very popular. We're going to talk about that though today through the lens of astrology, and we're doing that because, that's just I haven't heard. I'll say this. I have not heard a lot of astrologers talk about the correlation of the 369 mutable houses with the 369 Tesla manifestation method. But when I started to look at the pattern here, I was like, oh, this kind of makes sense, right? Because manifestation is manifestation, creation, right? And how do we create? We create through change. Okay. In fact, no state of change can exist. No state of creation exists without something changed, right? In order to create, you got to change something. So they're synonymous with one another. So I thought it would be very interesting to have a discussion on the 369 manifestation method, but to talk about it through the lens of the mutable houses. So we'll be talking about the third house of communication, the sixth house of service and health, the ninth house of travel and worldly experience, along with the 12th house, because 1 plus 2 breaks down to 3, of course. So we'll be talking about the house of outcomes, endings, and karma, as well with the 12th house. Since we're just ready to begin, let's just go for it. Tesla talks about this 369 method being a key to the universe, a key to the mechanisms that the universe uses by way of vibration and frequency and energy, right? So there's something about the 369, and threes are also very important aspects, right? So the initial aspect of the manifestation by way of the astrology added is to communicate the things that we want to have, the outcomes that we want, the things that we want to see in the end. All right. So the number 3 by way of astrology, or the three's resonance, I should say, numerology, would resonate with both the house of communication and the house of outcomes when it comes to manifestation. And what I think is very interesting about it is when you think about trying to manifest something, there's something that you're trying to speak into existence of a particular outcome. So it kind of makes sense, right? Like, I'm trying to create this scenario. I want to manifest X amount of dollars. I want to manifest this particular house, this particular job, right? Manifestation, whatever that thing that you want to get, right? So we're trying to invoke or speak into existence with literally the house of communication, the outcome, the 12th house of endings, karma, outcomes, right? What's basically unveiled. At the end of all of this manifestation talk, I'm just trying to get this outcome basically, right? So totally makes sense by way of the mutable houses of change. Now, what I think is really cool about the hidden alchemy here, of course, is that 3, of course, obvious communication, closed mouths don't get fed, right? You got to speak up on things. In fact, the third house is representing the planet Mercury. Mercury is the merchant, okay? And if you got merchandise for sale, you got to start talking. You got to tell folks, get the word out, okay? The third house, or Mercury, I should say, is also very keen on observations, looking, gathering intel, all the things that are required for manifestation. So it's important to learn, to communicate, to talk to folks, to let people know what you got going on, and then receive communications as well that will help support said manifestation, right? While holding on to the dream, which is the 12th house, right? It's your dreams. It's what your desired outcome, basically. And it is also about having the faith and belief that the 12th house inspires us all to have. The belief that we can make it to the end. Sweet brother Noopsy, or aka Neptune, also co-rules the 12th house, right? So again, since 12 does resonantly break down to a 3, it's also about communicating the faith that you have to believe in your dream. That's one of the biggest parts of manifestation, right? Is the faith to believe in this manifestation coming. And this also lends to the support of spiritual metaphysical teachers who talk about the ideology of living in the end, right? Of tapping into this feeling of already having it, right? That more or less attracts the things that you want to manifest to you, versus not being in resonance with the emotion of it, right? Or the feeling of it, or the feeling to have come. It's like, okay, for instance, it's that whole explanation of, I don't want a bad car, right? The idea is that you want a good car. That's what you. I don't want bad. I want good. However, emotionally, you're tapping into bad because you're saying I don't want. But what do you want? Don't not want a bad car. So if I say a bad car, now I'm thinking of problems. I'm thinking of emotional, like the turmoil I'm going to feel like of guessing if this car is going to crank up or not, right? I don't want that, but that's the energy frequency that I'm tapping into because of the emotional aspect of the focus, right? So yeah, you know what I mean? But it's about living in the end. Speaking of living in the end, I think this is the reason also why tarot and divination practices do work, because of this principle. So, because the three resonates with both the third house of communication and the 12th house of occult information, basically hidden knowledge, we're able to also use the mechanism of the cards or use the mechanism of an oracle to gather information of outcomes. Now, this is not to say that the tarot can indefinitely predict what will happen, right? However, if you're tapping into the end, right, by way of communication, so if I'm trying to communicate with an oracle, divine nature to see how things play out, then the philosophy of the science is kind of explained through Nikola Tesla's 369 methodology once you apply the concept of astrology in tandem with it, right? So not to say too much, but to say enough. I just wanted to make that point, that the oracles aren't necessarily why the outcome is what it is, but it, like our philosophy, is tapping into the end, right? Is tapping into the 12th house of endings, of hidden information, and then bringing that to us via the oracle or whatever mechanism of cards or runes, whatever you got going on, right? But via that particular mechanism, it's bringing that information from the subconscious or hidden world, the end and the outcome, into the sphere of our immediate environment by way of communicating with us. If that makes sense. All right. All right. Also, one caveat to this, though, with the manifestation thing, all right, if you know anything about Poseidon, Poseidon was known to have absolute fits if he cannot get his way. Okay, so you got to be okay too with outcomes not actually going your way. It sucks, right? When you think about having the all power of manifesting as well, but sometimes you got to carry with you the wisdom that you could be manifesting things that could be a pickle to get out of later, right? Because you can trouble easy to get into, sometimes hard to get out of, right? And there are also times where rejection is protection, right? Like that, I'm glad that didn't happen, right? God works out in mysterious ways, okay? Maybe it didn't land you where you thought it would, but there is a chance that you can change it. So, good enough on the 3. Let's talk about the 6. When it comes to the 6th step in the manifestation process, this is where we get a bit more earthy, okay? This is where the matters, because also too, we took the emotion and the thoughts and the emotion, we kind of put that into the first aspect of this, right? This communicating the outcome, right? Saying how we feel. Now we're going to do a little bit more work to it. Now we're going to see what works, what's useful, what can be of service, what's practical, what's efficient with the 6th house. 6 is very interesting too because it was the 6th day that God made man. Also, when you add up the number of the astrological houses in each season, it resonates with 6, okay? And it makes sense too because Mother Earth is very mutable. She changes, and this is the house of mutable Earth. We go through seasons and changes all the time. There's also the 6 aspect, which is kind of spooky, right? But when you think about it, it's really about somebody showing or someone showing up in their characteristics on a rhythmic routine basis, because this is the house of routines. This is what's helpful, what's useful, and a healthy routine about approaching life in a practical way, in a methodical way, is essential to any manifestation. Now, also to take some of the kind of negative connotation out of Mark of the Beast and just make it like PG or even rated G. Really, it's about characteristics that we do this all the time. If somebody is a fraidy cat, right? You're a scaredy cat, or they may be a chicken. You know what I mean? We're marking them as a beast. Or that might be your dog, right? That means that person is loyal. They show up loyal routinely for you. Somebody that you can count on, right? So we always do this. I mean, it's just like, it kind of sounds spooky when it's, said in that particular way. But this is how things routinely show up. But here I would say, like, this is about the useful things, things that work, things that are helpful. These are going to help service you to getting towards your manifestation. This is all supported here, right? So what's useful, what's not, what can help you. This is the sixth house vibration. And once you've kind of spoke it into existence, right? Now we just got to see what works. The things that don't work, we can totally allow ourselves to let go of, right? If you're trying to manifest peace, if there's something in the environment that you've learned about that isn't working for you, okay, sometimes you just kind of got to, change that up, right? This is unhealthy. So let me find a routine or something that material effects that I can kind of use to take me out of that essence of the environment and how it put me in, right? Let me just find a healthier way to approach it, right? That's always going to be the aims of what manifestations are. And then there are times, though, of course, okay, that people can manifest things that are unhealthy as well. So it just depends on your intent with a lot of these things, right? But nonetheless, the measurement of health, God's kind of saying this too, right? There's an assumptiveness that manifestations should be of service, should be useful. Some of these manifestations that we've seen in the modern world are just straight up abominations, and they're crimes against the mother earth. You know what I mean? For real. Like, shout out to Michael Jackson. He been trying to tell us, like, no, it's really no laughing matter. I just laugh at things that I cannot process, and you sometimes can't process how somebody could be so driven for profit when they've already made a bunch of money. You already made a bunch of money. So why would you need to keep doing the things that you're doing? You know what I mean? There's a way to live in harmony, and there's a way to live harmful. So yeah, essentially, I guess it's a matter of perspective, right? But the point of manifestation is that it's about being useful. And sometimes the things that are useful to me may be useless to someone else, depending on, right? I would say this too when we think about being used and how important usefulness is to manifestation, right? If somebody finds it useful to their manifestations, they ain't letting up on that. All right. I think that's the biggest thing that the six is kind of showing us, is that how you routinely show up characterizes your nature. Okay, so I would never expect the powers that be who show up constantly driven for profit to change their natures, okay, because they use this methodology to further their goals, to further their agenda. So why on earth would they give that up? Right? Because it's the right thing to do, if it was a morality based enterprise, of course, right? But it's never been. So it's not going to be that, right? I'm not expecting a zebra, okay, to operate like a sheep. Do you see what I'm saying? I wouldn't expect a lion to operate like a hippopotamus, right? But for the most part, 6 just represents the aspect of practice makes perfect. But once you find the perfect rhythm of how to manifest, once you analyze what's useful, you get the data, you meditate on how this can be of service, how this element works, all those things, which is really, really, Virgo's really good with that. The 6th house is very good with that. But once you have those in the bag, right, you pretty much got that manifestation along with it in the bag. So now the earthly element is supported by way of the 369 manifestation. So just to run it back, the first part of the 3 incorporates the 3rd house of communication, observation in the immediate environment, and the subconscious realm of the faith and belief from the 12th house to see things out in the end. That's your first step in manifestation. Then the next step is just going to be trial and error, right? There's no way to get things right without trial and error, right? And that's what the 6th house is really good for, right? What's working, what's not working. This is that space to truly refine the manifestation, okay? Once you have done that, we can then take it to the 9th house. Now, this is power, okay? This is the 3-6. I won't say the 3-6, but this is chapter 3-6. 666 Mafia. I'm just saying, like, a lot of people be tapped in and they've been knowing this shit, right? But let's make it practical. Let's talk about the 9 effect. But I'm going to run it on the number 9. So this is the mutable house by way of astrology of philosophy, experience, and higher learning. All right. And this is basically the space that your manifestation occupies the experience of it. It's like the X marks the spot. It's like, I'm here now. I'm experiencing this manifestation. 9 also, let's talk a little bit about the number 9 to build it up. 9, I believe, is the signature of God, and that's what the video that I'm going to make out soon is going to be about. But 9 is the signature of God, because 9 is the last of the single digit numbers, okay? But it's also written as a 0 and a 1. So it's truly where the first becomes last. It's the Alpha Omega. And when you think about a manifestation, what you began with, right, when it was just a hope and a dream, and you kind of speaking it into existence, and you went through the process of taking your first step and then making it the last step where you're actually experiencing it, you have embodied the archetype of the Alpha Omega. To go further with this number 9 reference, there are 9 chromosomes in the DNA. We have the 9-month human gestational period. And if you do the breakdown on the 0 and the 1, that same DNA is in the body. Our heads are circles, our torsos and bodies are linear. And to go further with the 0 and the 1 concept, right? Or the circle and the line. I also like use these symbols interchangeably. The 9 embodies both. So the circle and the line, the 2 rudimentary shapes that make up all other shapes in our existence. Everywhere you look, there's some type of circle or curvature or line, right? To even go further with this being God's signature, the 0 and the 1, which are also the circle and the line, the 0 and the 1 is the binary code, right? And this is how man makes digital worlds. So just like being made in the image of the Father, man has copied the same formula to replicate making digital worlds. Now, I don't know if we can make beings like that, right? Because there's this whole question about sentience and shit like that, but conversation for another day. But do we get it? I think we do, right? 9 is a very prolific number. It's associated with deities like that of Zeus, the ultimate Greek god in a lot of cases, arguably. And of course, God the Father from the Holy Trinity, okay? 9 is associated with the constellation Sagittarius. And Sag is pointing towards the Crux constellation, which is not too far. And it's a cross or an X, right? So X marks the spot. This is the aim that you're trying to get to from whatever your manifestation is, right? That outcome. Now we can experience it. And Jupiter, the planet that's associated with 9, is a benevolent planet. It's here to give gifts, but only to the courageous, those who are willing to travel the distance and go farther, right? It's like cool to have a manifestation, but if you're too scared to put out the content, or if you're too, been there, but if you're too worried that, things just may not work out. If you don't have the faith and the belief in yourself, if you don't have the willingness to go through the trial and error of practice makes perfect, you don't really get the rewards of the experience in the 9th house, right? So God's here to give you gifts, okay, for sure. Just ask in my name, right? But you also got to follow up with the works, the trust, the process, the methodical, necessary steps to get you to the end, right? Because again, using just parts of the manifestation technique don't work. You got to kind of incorporate it all together. But the 9th house is where it all has to come together so that it can be embodied in the experience to take you farther. The number 9 also has a lot to do with the philosophy, right? Experiences basically develop our philosophy when you think about the 9th house. And when it's layered onto the method of manifestation using the 3, 6, 9, this is probably why people who manifest the things that they desire, right? They have a certain philosophy and outlook on life. If you have a particular way of manifesting, your philosophy is based off that, right? So if it's easy for you to get those things that you want to do, if you're able to like I saw this guy who's a lumberjack, can make houses and log cabins and shit like that, and he's out there by himself doing it. I'm like, damn, that's so cool, right? But he's able to manifest that way. So his philosophy is more like a hard work. Patience takes time, but you can build certain things, right? Versus a philosopher of an influencer who's like, buy my ebook. This is going to sell you, all that kind of stuff, right? So everybody's got a different philosophy based off their experiences, right? One guy is doing one thing, somebody else is doing something else. But this is also just for the basis of understanding that manifestation will affect your philosophy. If you're having problems manifesting, right, are you going to probably have the best outlook on life? Probably not so much, right? You might be like, man, God don't fuck with me. But if you're out there getting it, okay, I'm favored. These are where these philosophies come from. And I think that favor is just really a matter of technique, belief, right? Things like that. Because there's some people who are doing some really demonic shit that technically are manifesting. You know what I mean? And I'm not going to say that inherently makes them a good person. I will say that makes them good at their technique of manifesting, right? So again, it's all very subjective. And that's one thing that the mutable houses teach you. All this shit is subjective. However, nonetheless, the X is where it marks the spot for the ninth house. So now we are able to experience. One of the other key messages of the ninth house is wisdom, okay? Because now that you've manifested this thing, Victor Frankenstein, okay, or whatever that nickname was, now that you've actually created this creature, what you gonna do with it? Right? Because now you've created it. Now you've experienced it. You cannot untoast the toast at this point, buddy. You're not able to put the toothpaste back into the tube, right? This is where that point comes, where the of no return. Basically, this is the point of no return. And that's one of the things that manifestations have. It's a gift and a curse, right? But yeah, I mean, you can create a lot of things. Like, you can go into a situation and manifest a whole bunch of chaos because of whatever reason that you got, right? Whatever logic or reasoning or whatever it is, right? So, but the thing is like, you got to be okay with those manifestations. Like, it's cool to go off and be like the baddest one out here and rah-rah and shit. But if you didn't, took out somebody's child because you rah-rah and shit, you got to also deal with the dealings of your said manifestation, right? So be ye wise. That's the point of the ninth house. Wisdom. All right. Yes, you can manifest a situation where you clearing out the club and shit, but are you also going to be able to deal with the repercussions of that situation when everybody's pointing the finger at you? Like, that's the one who did it. Go get them. You know what I mean? Because you created havoc in their lives based off your manifestations. So wisdom is the key here, okay? But hopefully that's just like extreme cases, right? But the point is that you're taking things farther. You actually are the alpha omega. You started at your first, and then you saw your first become your last, the last form of the manifestation, right? When it was first being birthed, it was just seeds, it was thoughts, it was ideas, it was a feeling, it was an intuition, it was like a calling that I felt. I started to kind of work at it, apply application, see what works, trial and error. This did, and that was cool, finally got that right. And now I'm in the experience. I'm able to take it further. And that's the point that we're trying to get to with our manifestation technique. But one of the things that I didn't want to do in this content was also just add my take when it comes to astrology, because I haven't heard a lot of astrologers talk about it. But when it hit me to talk about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this totally makes sense, right? Because in order to manifest, you have to change. And the mutable houses are where we occupy that change. Manifestation comes through our ability to change. Don't ever feel like you're stuck. Don't ever feel like you can't change. Don't ever feel like that version of you is beyond yourself, right? It can happen. It can totally be you, okay? By way of your belief, by way of your manifestation, by way of the power to invoke change. Now, this also means that there's responsibility that comes with the changes that we create in the world, right? Like the butterfly effect, like if once you do something, it causes something else to be affected. So understand that. And this is happening simultaneously, right? I'm creating while you're creating, and we're all manifesting. So there might be some areas where we kind of bump heads with each other, right? So we have to be mindful that our manifestations are not just ours. They are a collective on the field. However, manifestation largely in part comes from an internal space. And why do you say that, Valencia? Well, I say that because the 3 and the 6 aspect of the 369 are the internal hemispheres of the zodiacal wheel. So, and the internal is all you, right? So a lot of manifestation is up to you. It's what you're going to do to initiate the change that you want to make. If you want to make that change, for once in your life, you got to look at that man in the mirror, okay? Versus the world outside of you. And that's a big thing as well. And then I think that's really all I got when it comes to manifesting with the 369 methodology and what Tesla's trying to point out, in tandem with adding that to the layer of astrology that talks about the mutable areas of life that are affected by the zodiac transit wheel, right? It all comes down to change. But if you can understand the power and the source of change through vibration, right? Do a vibe check. The frequency, okay? What frequency or are you frequently tapped into? And ultimately your energy, right? What are you going to be putting your energy towards? But if you can tap into that in relationship to, because these are the structures of the universe, right? If you can tap into that, understanding the element of communication, the element of of speaking things into existence, trial and error, and then ultimately experiencing it and then becoming wise from those manifestations that we make, you're going to pretty much be locked in. So I'm truly excited about the journey of change that I am embodying at this point, right? Part of me making changes is just ultimately being okay in that uncomfortability zone, right? And still doing it anyway. That makes me feel good. So, yeah, I think that's it. That's all that I have when it comes to this method. Like I said, I just haven't heard a lot of astrologers talk about the 369 method in tandem with the mutable houses. But once I did, I was like, oh yeah, the key to this shit is change, okay? So with all that being said, thank you for joining me. Thank you for having the time to share with me. I just want to say thank you for joining and taking the time to hang out. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I cannot wait to have some more. So until then, I hope that you are well and that you take care. Bye.